The rain came down like bullets on the cobblestone streets of Little Italy. It was the kind of rain that made honest people run for cover and sent the dishonest ones deeper into the shadows. Emma Cole didn't have time for either. She had 3 tables waiting, a double shift that started at noon and wouldn't end until the kitchen closed at 2 in the morning, and a brother whose debts were piling up faster than she could count. The fluorescent lights of Rose's kitchen hummed with a warmth that the rest of Manhattan had forgotten. It was an old place, the kind with checkered floors and photographs on the walls from another era. Black and white images of stern Italian men in suspenders, women with flour on their aprons, children playing stickball in the street. The restaurant was a relic, and everyone who walked through its doors knew it. That was the point. Emma pushed through the kitchen's swinging door, balancing 3 plates of linguine alla vongole on her left arm and a basket of bread in her right hand. The heat from the stoves made her skin flush. The smell of garlic and basil and baked dough wrapped around her like a blanket. For a moment, just a single moment, she could almost forget the stack of overdue bills sitting on her kitchen counter, the final notice from the hospital, the threat scrawled on her apartment door in red marker. Almost. "Table 12, Mario barked from the grill, his accent thick as tomato sauce. "They've been waiting 20 minutes. Emma nodded, adjusting her grip on the plates. Table 12, the private booth in the back corner, the one with the curtain that could be drawn for privacy, the one that regular customers never sat in, the one reserved for people who didn't want to be seen. She made her way through the crowded dining room, weaving between families arguing over the last cannoli and couples leaning close over candlelight. The booth curtain was half drawn. She could see the edge of a wheelchair, the corner of an expensive-looking shawl, 2 men in black suits standing like statues on either side. Emma took a breath and pushed the curtain aside. The woman in the wheelchair looked like she had been carved from marble. Her silver hair was pinned back with an ornate comb, and her eyes, dark and sharp, tracked Emma's every movement. A stroke had left the left side of her face slightly drooping, and her left hand lay motionless in her lap. But there was nothing weak about her. She radiated a kind of power that had nothing to do with physical strength. "Good evening," Emma said, setting the plates down with practiced efficiency. "Can I get you anything else?" The woman's good hand waved dismissively at the food. "This is not what I ordered." Emma glanced at the ticket. Linguine, clams, white wine sauce. Exactly what was written down. "I'm sorry, ma'am. What did you order?" "Ossobuco," the woman said, her voice like gravel wrapped in silk. "The way it used to be made, 40 years ago, before everything changed." Emma hesitated. Ossobuco wasn't on the menu anymore. It hadn't been for years, according to Mario. Too expensive. Too time-consuming. The tourists wanted pasta and pizza, not braised veal shanks that took 4 hours to prepare. "I'm sorry," Emma started, but the woman cut her off. "Of course you are. Everyone is sorry. No one does anything about it." One of the bodyguards stepped forward. "Mrs. Santoro, we should go." But the woman, Mrs. Santoro, wasn't listening. She was staring at Emma with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "What is your name, child?" Emma Cole." "Emma." The woman tested the name on her tongue. "You look like someone who understands loss." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. And it was so accurate, so uncomfortably precise, that Emma felt something crack open in her chest. She thought about her parents, the fire, the smell of smoke that still haunted her dreams 15 years later. She thought about Ryan, her brother, who used to build her dollhouses from cardboard boxes and now couldn't go a week without placing a bet he couldn't afford. She thought about the man who had cornered her outside her building last night, the one who smelled like cheap cologne and expensive threats, who told her she had 2 weeks to come up with $45,000 or things would get very, very unpleasant. "I'll make you the ossobuco," Emma heard herself say. "Mrs. Santoro's eyebrows rose. "The kitchen doesn't have the recipe." "Yes, it does." Emma turned on her heel and pushed back into the kitchen. Mario looked up from the grill, his face flushed with heat and annoyance. "What now?" "Do we have veal shanks?" "In the freezer, but we don't serve." "And white wine? Tomatoes? Gremolata?" Mario frowned. "What are you doing, Cole?" Emma didn't answer. She moved through the kitchen like she'd been there her whole life, even though it had only been 6 months. She found the veal in the walk-in freezer, still wrapped in butcher paper. She found the wine on the shelf where the expensive bottles lived, the ones saved for special orders. She found the ingredients for gremolata, lemon zest, garlic, and parsley, and began to prep them with quick, efficient movements. On the wall above the prep station there was a photograph, faded, curling at the edges. It showed a young woman standing in front of the restaurant, circa 1985, according to the date scrawled on the back. She was smiling, holding a dish that Emma recognized from cooking shows and food magazines. Osobuco. Beneath the photo, someone had written the recipe in careful handwriting. Emma followed it like a map to buried treasure. She browned the shanks, deglazed the pan with wine, added tomatoes and stock and herbs. She let it simmer while she made the gremolata, the bright, sharp paste that would cut through the richness of the meat. The kitchen filled with a smell that made even Mario stop and stare. "Where did you learn to do that?" he asked. "I didn't," Emma said. "I'm just following directions." 45 minutes later, she carried the plate back to table 12. Mrs. Santoro was still sitting in the same position, her good hand resting on the arm of her wheelchair, her dark eyes fixed on the curtain as if she'd been waiting for Emma to reappear, which of course she had. Emma set the plate down. The veal was falling off the bone. The sauce was rich and glossy. The gremolata on top added a pop of green against the brown. Mrs. Santoro stared at it for a long moment. Then she picked up her fork with her good hand and took a bite. Emma watched her face, watched the way her eyes closed, the way her shoulders, which had been tight with tension, suddenly relaxed, the way a single tear rolled down her cheek. "This," Mrs. Santoro whispered, "is exactly how I made it. Exactly." Emma felt something warm bloom in her chest. Pride, maybe, or relief, or just the simple satisfaction of making someone happy in a world that seemed determined to grind everyone down. "Thank you," Mrs. Santoro said, and it sounded like a benediction. Emma was about to respond when she noticed something, or rather, someone. In the shadows behind Mrs. Santoro, in the corner of the booth where the light didn't quite reach, there was a man. He was sitting perfectly still, arms crossed, face half hidden in darkness. But his eyes, they were visible. Gray eyes, cold as winter, sharp as broken glass. They were fixed on Emma with an intensity that made her breath catch. She hadn't noticed him before. How long had he been sitting there, watching? Mrs. Santoro followed Emma's gaze and smiled, a small, knowing smile. "My son," she said. "Marcus." The man didn't move, didn't speak, just kept staring. Emma felt like prey being studied by a predator. "It's nice to meet you," she managed, though her voice came out smaller than she intended. Still, Marcus said nothing. He simply reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a money clip, and peeled off several bills. He set them on the table. $500 for a $40 meal. Emma shook her head. "I don't need—" "Take it," Mrs. Santoro said gently. "You earned it." But Emma left the money on the table and walked away, her heart pounding for reasons she couldn't quite name. Behind her, she heard Mrs. Santoro say something in Italian, too soft for Emma to catch. And then Marcus's voice, low and rough, answering in English. "Yes, Mama, I saw." The rest of Emma's shift passed in a blur. She served drinks and cleared plates and smiled at customers who left small tips and big messes. By the time the last table paid their bill and the kitchen staff began their end-of-night cleaning ritual, Emma's feet ached and her back screamed, and all she wanted was to collapse into bed. But bed was in Queens. And Queens meant walking 6 blocks to the subway, riding the train for 40 minutes, and then walking another 4 blocks through a neighborhood where the streetlights were more broken than functional. It also meant going home to Ryan. Emma grabbed her coat from the hook by the staff entrance and pushed out into the rain. It had gotten worse since her shift started, the kind of rain that soaked through fabric in seconds and turned the streets into rivers. She pulled her hood up and started walking. The subway station was a cave of flickering fluorescent lights and the smell of wet concrete. Emma descended the steps, swiped her card, and waited on the platform with a handful of other late-night travelers. A man in a suit, drunk and swaying. 2 teenagers with headphones in, lost in their own worlds. An old woman with shopping bags who looked like she hadn't slept in days. The train came. Emma found a seat near the door and watched the city blur past the windows. Lights and shadows. Movement and stillness. A million lives happening all at once, most of them invisible to each other. She thought about Mrs. Santoro, about the way the old woman had looked at her, like she could see straight through skin and bone to whatever Emma kept hidden underneath. She thought about Marcus sitting in the shadows, silent as a ghost. She thought about the $500 she'd refused and wondered if she'd made a mistake. $45,000, 2 weeks. The train rattled and squealed. Emma closed her eyes. Her apartment building was exactly as depressing as she remembered. 6 stories of peeling paint and broken windows and doors that didn't lock properly. The kind of place landlords forgot about and tenants couldn't afford to leave. Emma climbed the stairs to the third floor, her legs protesting every step, and unlocked the door to 3B. The smell hit her first. Stale beer, unwashed laundry, something rotten in the kitchen sink. Ryan was on the couch exactly where she'd left him 12 hours ago. He was sprawled out like a marionette with cut strings, one arm dangling toward the floor, the other draped over his eyes. Empty beer cans formed a small pyramid on the coffee table. The television was on, some late-night talk show playing to an audience of one. Ryan, Emma said. He didn't move. She said his name again, louder this time. He groaned and shifted, pulling his arm away from his face. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair stuck up in greasy spikes. He looked 10 years older than 28. "What time is it?" he mumbled. 2:30. "Did you eat?" He waved vaguely at the coffee table, a pizza box, empty except for crusts. "Yeah." Emma set her bag down and started gathering the beer cans. "You said you were going to look for work today." "I did look." "Where?" "Places." "What places, Ryan?" He sat up, rubbing his face with both hands. "Why does it matter? Nobody's hiring. Or they are, but they're not hiring guys with records." Emma threw the cans into the recycling bin with more force than necessary. "You made one mistake 3 years ago. Most places don't. Most places do, Em. You think I haven't tried?" His voice cracked. "You think I like sitting here, living off my little sister, drinking because it's the only thing that shuts my brain up?" Emma stopped, took a breath, softened. "I know you're trying. Do you?" Ryan looked at her, and for a moment, she saw the brother she remembered, the one who used to walk her to school every day, the one who taught her how to ride a bike and punched Tommy Garcia in the mouth when he pulled her hair in 5th grade, the one who cried at their parents' funeral and promised he'd take care of her, no matter what. "I met someone," Ryan said quietly, "a guy who says he can help." Emma's stomach dropped. "What kind of help?" "The kind that makes problems go away. He said if I gave him some information, he could clear the debt. All of it." "Information about what?" Ryan didn't answer. "Ryan, information about what?" He stood up, swaying slightly, and walked toward the window. "It doesn't matter. I haven't decided yet." But the way he said it, the way he wouldn't meet her eyes, told Emma everything she needed to know. He'd already decided. He'd probably already made the deal. "Don't do anything stupid," she said. Ryan laughed, a bitter sound that had nothing to do with humor. Too late for that. Emma wanted to argue, wanted to shake him, wanted to turn back time to before the gambling, before the debts, before the night their parents died and left 2 kids to figure out how to survive in a city that ate people alive. But she was too tired. So instead, she went to her bedroom, a space barely big enough for a twin mattress and a dresser, and lay down in her clothes. Through the thin walls, she could hear Ryan moving around, opening the fridge, closing it, turning off the television. The apartment fell silent. Emma stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about 2 weeks. Tried not to think about men with hard eyes and soft threats. Tried not to think about what happened to people who couldn't pay their debts in this city. She thought about Osobuco instead, about the way Mrs. Santoro's face had transformed, about gray eyes watching from the shadows. She fell asleep to the sound of rain against the window. The next morning came too fast. Emma's alarm went off at 7, a harsh digital beeping that felt like needles in her brain. She silenced it and dragged herself out of bed. Ryan's door was closed. She didn't bother knocking. By 8, she was back on the subway. By 9, she was standing in front of Rosa's kitchen, watching Mario unlock the front door. "You're early," he said. "Couldn't sleep." He grunted and let her in. The restaurant looked different in the morning light, softer. The photographs on the walls seemed less faded. The checkered floor, less worn. Emma started her opening routine, flipping chairs off tables and filling salt shakers and folding napkins into triangles. At 10, the phone rang. Mario answered it, listened for a moment, then held it out to Emma. "For you." Emma frowned. Nobody called her at work. "Hello?" "Miss Cole." The voice was female, older, precise. "This is Rosa Santoro. We met last night." Emma's hand tightened on the phone. "Yes, Mrs. Santoro. Is everything all right?" "Everything is perfect. Your osobuco was magnificent. I would like you to make it again." When?" "Today. I will arrive at noon. I will sit at the same table, and you will cook for me." It wasn't a request. "Mrs. Santoro, I'm just a waitress. I don't—" "You do now. I will pay you $200 per hour for your time, and I will expect you to sit with me while I eat." Emma opened her mouth, closed it. $200 an hour. For cooking and conversation. It sounded too good to be true. which meant it probably was. Why? Emma asked. There was a pause, then, because you remind me of someone I used to know, and because I am a lonely old woman who would like some company. Is that reason enough? It wasn't, but Emma said yes anyway. Mrs. Santoro arrived at noon exactly, her wheelchair pushed by one of the same bodyguards from the night before. She wore a different outfit today, a cream-colored blouse and a green scarf that brought out the color in her eyes. She looked regal, like a queen holding court in a kingdom made of pasta and red sauce. Emma brought her the ossobuco, sat across from her in the booth, and for the next hour, she listened to Rosa Santoro tell stories. Stories about growing up in this neighborhood in the 1950s, when the streets were full of pushcarts and men in fedoras and women who hung their laundry from fire escapes like flags. Stories about working in this very restaurant as a young woman, learning to cook from the owner's mother, falling in love with a man who promised her the world and gave her a son instead. My husband died when Marcus was 16, Rosa said, her good hand tracing the rim of her wineglass. A heart attack, they said, but I knew better. Emma didn't ask what she meant. Some doors were better left closed. Marcus became the man of the house overnight, Rosa continued. Too young, too much responsibility, but he never complained. He took care of me, built a life for us. He's a good son. Emma thought about the man in the shadows, the gray eyes, the silence. He seems very protective. Rosa smiled. He is, sometimes too much. He forgets that I survived long before he was born. She set her glass down. Tell me about you, Emma, your family. The question landed like a stone in still water. There's not much to tell, Emma said carefully. My parents died when I was 10, a fire. My brother and I went into foster care for a while. We've been on our own since I turned 18. Rosa's face changed. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or guilt. A fire, she repeated. Where? Here, Little Italy. They were closing up a restaurant where they worked. What was the name of the restaurant? Emma tried to remember. She'd been so young. The memories were fragments. Broken glass, smoke, sirens. I don't know, I'm sorry. Rosa reached across the table and took Emma's hand with her good one. Her skin was thin as paper, but her grip was strong. I'm sorry for your loss, child. No one should lose their parents so young. They sat like that for a moment, two women connected by grief and something else Emma couldn't quite name. Then Rosa released her hand and changed the subject. They talked about lighter things, food, weather, the tourists who came to Little Italy expecting authenticity and left disappointed. By the time Rosa's bodyguard appeared to take her home, Emma felt like she'd known the old woman for years instead of hours. Same time tomorrow? Rosa asked as she was wheeled toward the door. Yes, ma'am. And Emma? Call me Rosa. Emma watched her leave, then returned to her regular shift. The restaurant filled up with the lunch crowd. She served minestrone and chicken parmigiana and tried not to think about how a $200 an hour job had literally just fallen into her lap. But good things didn't happen to people like her. Not without a quickness. That night, as Emma walked home from the subway, she found out what the cost was. The streetlights on her block were out again. They'd been out for 3 weeks, and despite multiple calls to the city, nobody had come to fix them. Emma walked quickly, keys between her knuckles like Mario had taught her, eyes scanning the shadows. She was half a block from her building when she heard footsteps behind her. Fast, heavy, getting closer. Emma started to run. A hand grabbed her arm and spun her around. She swung with the keys, aiming for eyes, but the man caught her wrist and twisted. Pain shot up her arm. The keys fell to the wet pavement with a metallic clatter. There were 2 of them. The first man was bald with a scar running from his ear to his chin. The second was younger, cockier, with a smile that made Emma's skin crawl. Emma Cole, the bald one said. It wasn't a question. Let go of me. Can't do that, sweetheart. See, you owe my boss some money, $45,000 plus interest. And the thing is, your brother skipped town yesterday, left you holding the bag. Emma's blood turned to ice. Ryan was gone. That's not possible, she said. But even as the words left her mouth, she knew they were a lie. Of course it was possible. Of course Ryan had run. What else did she expect? Oh, it's very possible, the younger one said, stepping closer. His breath smelled like cigarettes and something sour. But don't worry, Vincent, that's our boss. He's a reasonable guy. He's willing to work something out. I don't have the money. We know. That's why we're here. The bald one tightened his grip. Vincent says you're pretty. Says maybe you could work off the debt. Few hours a night. Easy work. The implication hung in the air like poison. Emma tried to pull away, but they were too strong. The younger one grabbed her other arm. They started dragging her toward a car parked at the corner, engine running, windows tinted black. She screamed. The sound echoed off the empty buildings, swallowed by the night. Nobody came. Nobody even looked out their windows. This was the kind of neighborhood where people minded their business and survived. Emma kicked, bit, fought with everything she had, but it wasn't enough. The car door opened, and then the world exploded with light. Headlights, bright as suns, flooded the street. Tires squealed, car doors slammed. Emma heard shouting, movement, the metallic click of weapons being drawn. The two men dropped her. She fell to her knees, gasping. Through the glare of the headlights, she saw silhouettes. 5 men emerging from black SUVs. They moved with military precision, guns raised, surrounding the two thugs in seconds. And then one more figure stepped out of the lead vehicle. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with a calm that was somehow more terrifying than violence. Marcus Santoro. He wore a long coat that billowed slightly in the wind. His face was illuminated by the headlights, all sharp angles and cold fury. He didn't run. He walked. Each step deliberate, each step inevitable. "Let her go," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. The bald man's eyes went wide. "Santoro, this is Caruso business. The girl owes..." "She owes nothing." Marcus stopped 3 feet away. "I just bought her debt, $45,000. Consider it paid." "You can't." "I can. I did." Marcus's eyes flicked to Emma, checking if she was hurt, then returned to the bald man. "Now get in your car and drive away. Tell Vincent Caruso that if he sends anyone else to this neighborhood, to this block, to this woman, I will personally deliver his head to his mother." The younger thug reached for his weapon. One of Marcus's men, a solid-looking guy with gray at his temples, stepped forward and pressed a gun to the young man's skull. "Don't," the older one said simply. The bald man grabbed his partner and pulled him toward their car. They got in, slammed the doors, and drove away with screeching tires. Silence fell over the street. Emma was still on her knees, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. Marcus knelt beside her. Up close, his eyes weren't as cold as she'd thought. There was something else in them. Concern, maybe, or recognition. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Emma shook her head. She didn't trust her voice. Marcus shrugged out of his coat and draped it over her shoulders. It was warm from his body heat and smelled like expensive tobacco and something woody. Sandalwood, maybe. It swallowed her whole. "Can you stand?" She nodded. Marcus helped her up, one hand under her elbow, steadying her. The world tilted and spun, adrenaline crash hitting her like a freight train. "Why?" Emma managed. "Why did you do that?" Marcus looked at her for a long moment. "My mother likes you. That's reason enough. Nobody does something like this just because their mother likes someone." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "You're right. Nobody does." He gestured to one of the SUVs. "Get in. I'll take you somewhere safe." "I need to go home. My brother..." "Your brother isn't there. He left 2 days ago. Headed west, according to my sources." Emma felt like she'd been punched. 2 days. Ryan had been gone for 2 days, and she hadn't even known. She'd been sleeping 6 feet away from his empty bedroom, completely unaware. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You will, but first, you need to get off this street. The Carusos won't stop because I told them to. They'll come back with more men and more guns, and next time, I might not arrive in time." Emma looked at her apartment building, at the broken windows and the door that didn't lock properly, at the life she'd built from scraps and determination. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Except it wasn't. Not really. It belonged to landlords who didn't fix the heat and loan sharks who sent men in the night and a city that ground people down until there was nothing left. She looked at Marcus, at the hand he'd extended, offering safety and something else she couldn't quite name. She looked at the SUVs and the armed men and the escape route he was providing. Going with him meant entering a world she didn't understand. A world of violence and money and consequences she couldn't predict. Staying meant dying. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. Emma took his hand. Marcus's fingers closed around hers, warm and solid and strangely gentle for someone who had just threatened to decapitate a man. He led her to the SUV. The door opened. Emma climbed inside, sinking into leather seats that probably cost more than her entire apartment's worth of furniture. Marcus slid in beside her. The door closed. The convoy pulled away from the curb, leaving her old life behind. "Where are we going?" Emma asked. "Home," Marcus said. Then he spoke into a small microphone in his lapel. "Tony, we're coming back. Prepare the east wing." Emma pulled his coat tighter around her shoulders and watched Queens disappear through the tinted windows. She'd made her choice. For better or worse, she'd stepped into the lion's den. And somehow, surrounded by armed men and the smell of gunpowder still lingering in the air, she felt safer than she had in years. The Santoro estate sat on the cliffs overlooking the Hudson River, like a fortress that had forgotten it was supposed to be a home. Gothic spires reached toward the gray morning sky, gargoyles perched on corners, their stone faces frozen in eternal snarls. Iron gates, 20 feet high and reinforced with steel, closed behind the convoy with a sound like a prison door slamming shut. Emma pressed her face to the window and watched the world she knew disappear behind those gates. The city lights faded into darkness. The sounds of traffic and sirens and humanity became distant memories. By the time the SUV pulled up to the main entrance, she felt like she'd crossed into another country entirely. Marcus hadn't spoken during the drive. He'd made several phone calls in Italian, his voice low and controlled, never once looking at Emma, but she could feel his presence beside her, solid and overwhelming, like gravity itself had shifted to orbit around him. The car stopped. A man in a dark suit opened the door. Marcus stepped out first, then offered his hand to Emma. She took it and emerged into the cold night air. The estate loomed above her, all stone and shadows and secrets. "Welcome to purgatory," she muttered. Marcus's lips twitched, almost a smile. "It's not purgatory. It's the safest place on the eastern seaboard. My mother has better security than the governor. And less freedom, I assume." This time he did smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Freedom is a luxury for people who aren't being hunted. You're alive. That should be enough for tonight." Emma wanted to argue, wanted to point out that being alive in a cage wasn't really living, but exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. The adrenaline that had kept her upright during the attack was gone, leaving only bone-deep weariness and the trembling aftermath of fear. Marcus seemed to sense this. His hand moved to the small of her back, not quite touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his palm. "Come, I'll show you to your room." The interior of the mansion matched the exterior, black marble floors polished to mirror brightness. A crystal chandelier the size of Emma's entire apartment, hanging from a ceiling, painted with angels and demons locked in eternal combat. A grand staircase that curved upward into shadow. But beneath the beauty, Emma noticed other things. Security cameras in every corner, their red lights blinking like watchful eyes. The bulge of weapons beneath the suits of the staff members who moved through the halls. Windows reinforced with what looked like bulletproof glass, thick enough to stop a tank round. This wasn't a home. It was a bunker disguised as a palace. Tony, the gray-haired man from the street, appeared at Marcus's elbow. He was shorter than his boss, compact and solid, with the kind of face that had seen everything and been surprised by nothing. "Boss, East Wing is ready. I put her in the room overlooking the river." Marcus nodded. "Thank you. Any word on the brother?" "Left on a Greyhound bus heading to Nevada 2 nights ago. Used cash. No phone. He's trying to disappear." Emma's chest constricted. Nevada. Ryan had gone to Vegas, probably. The gambling capital of America. Of course he had. Some addictions couldn't be outrun. "Keep monitoring bus stations and cheap hotels," Marcus said. "If the Carusos find him before we do, they'll use him as leverage." "Understood." Tony left. Marcus turned to Emma, and for a moment something that looked almost like sympathy crossed his face. "I'm sorry about your brother." "Don't be. He made his choice." Emma's voice came out harder than she intended. "Can I see my room now? I'm tired." Marcus led her up the grand staircase, down a hallway lined with portraits of stern-faced men and elegant women, all of them dead and gone but still watching. The East Wing was quieter than the rest of the house, softer somehow. The carpet was plush beneath Emma's feet, and the lighting was warm instead of harsh. He stopped at a door near the end of the hall and opened it. Emma stepped inside and forgot how to breathe. The room was bigger than her entire apartment. A king-size bed dominated the space, draped in silk sheets the color of midnight. A fireplace, currently cold, but ready to be lit. A sitting area with chairs that looked like they'd been stolen from a royal palace. Floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the Hudson River, dark water reflecting the moon. But what made Emma's heart stutter was the closet. Marcus opened it to reveal racks of clothing, sweaters, blouses, pants, dresses, in her size, and all clearly expensive, all waiting like they'd known she was coming. "How?" Emma turned to face him. "How did you know my size? How did you know I'd even come here?" Marcus leaned against the doorframe, his gray eyes unreadable. "I've been watching you since the night you fed my mother. I know your size. I know you walk 6 blocks to the subway every night. I know you work double shifts at a diner on weekends. I know you haven't bought new clothes in 8 months. I know everything about you, Emma Cole. It should have terrified her. The invasion of privacy, the stalker-level obsession. But standing in this room that had been prepared for her, wearing a coat that still smelled like him, Emma felt something else entirely. Something dangerous. That's creepy, she said. I know. Why did you do it? Marcus pushed off the doorframe and walked toward her. He moved like a predator, all controlled grace and coiled power. He stopped inches away, close enough that Emma had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Because the first time I saw you, he said quietly, you were wiping tears from my mother's face. You touched her like she mattered, like she was a person instead of a law or an obligation. Nobody's done that in years, maybe ever. And I thought, he paused, jaw tightening, I thought that anyone capable of that much kindness in a world this dark deserved to be protected. Emma's pulse hammered in her throat. I'm not a damsel in distress. No, you're not. You're something far more dangerous. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back up. You're someone I can't stop thinking about. And that makes you a liability I can't afford. He stepped back, putting distance between them like it physically hurt. Get some sleep. Tomorrow you start working with my mother, physical therapy, conversation, whatever she needs. You'll be paid $5,000 per week, all expenses covered. You're safe here, Emma, safer than you've ever been. And if I want to leave, Marcus's expression hardened, then I'll station 6 guards outside whatever apartment you choose to rent. You'll never be alone again. The Carusos won't stop, not until they've made their point. So you can stay here, in comfort and safety, or you can leave and spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. Your choice, Emma. He turned and walked to the door, paused with his hand on the handle. For what it's worth, I hope you stay. Then he was gone, leaving Emma alone in a room that felt like a golden cage. She walked to the window and pressed her forehead against the cool glass. Below, the ground stretched out in manicured perfection. Guard patrols moved through the shadows like ghosts. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the river flowing, indifferent to human drama. Emma thought about Ryan, about her parents, about the life she'd built from nothing and how easily it had been torn away. She thought about Marcus, watching her from the darkness, learning everything about her, preparing this room like a spider spinning a web. She should be afraid, should be planning her escape. But as she climbed into the silk sheets and let exhaustion claim her, Emma realized the most terrifying thing of all. She didn't want to leave. Morning came with gentle sunlight and the smell of coffee. Emma woke disoriented, reaching for an alarm clock that wasn't there, in a bed far too comfortable to be real. For a moment, she thought she'd dreamed the entire night. The attack, the rescue, the mansion. Then she saw the clothes hanging in the open closet and knew it was all horrifyingly real. Someone had left a breakfast tray outside her door. Fresh pastries, fruit, coffee in a silver pot with real cream and sugar cubes. Emma carried it inside and ate by the window, watching the sun turn the Hudson River into molten gold. A knock interrupted her second cup of coffee. Come in, Emma called. The door opened to reveal Rosa Santoro. She wasn't in her wheelchair. Instead, she walked slowly with the help of a carved wooden cane, her left hand still weak but functional. She wore a cream-colored pantsuit and had her silver hair pinned up in an elegant twist. She looked every inch the matriarch, powerful and sharp despite her age and injury. Good morning, child, Rosa said, making her way to one of the sitting area chairs. I trust you slept well. Emma set down her coffee cup. Mrs. Santoro, I didn't expect... Rosa. We agreed on Rosa. The old woman settled into the chair with a soft sigh, and I came to apologize. My son has a tendency toward grand gestures. Buying debts, moving young women into his home, it must have been quite a shock. That's one word for it, Rosa smiled. He means well. Marcus has carried the weight of this family since he was 17 years old. Sometimes he forgets that not everyone needs to be saved. Emma thought about the men dragging her toward a car, about the darkness that had been closing in. I did need to be saved. Last night, at least. Yes, and now you are here, safe, but also trapped in a way. Rosa's dark eyes studied Emma's face. Do you know why I asked you to work for me? You said I reminded you of someone. You do. You remind me of myself 40 years ago, young, alone, trying to survive in a world that wanted to grind me into dust. Rosa's good hand gripped the head of her cane. I made choices then, some good, many bad. I aligned myself with powerful men because I had no power of my own. And I've been paying for those choices ever since. Emma sat forward. What are you trying to tell me? That you have a choice now. You can stay here, accept Marcus's protection, and become part of this world. Or you can leave, and we will do our best to keep you safe from a distance. But whatever you choose it with open eyes, because once you enter this life fully, there's no walking away. The words hung in the air between them. Emma thought about Ryan, who had tried to make deals with dangerous men and ended up running for his life. She thought about her parents who had died in a fire that maybe wasn't an accident. She thought about Marcus, watching from the shadows, offering protection that felt like possession. What if I stay but refuse to become part of it? Emma asked. What if I just work with you and keep my distance from everything else? Rosa's smile was sad. You can try, but proximity changes people. You'll see things, learn things. And one day, you'll have to decide if you can live with the knowledge of what we are and what we do. What do you do? We survive, Rosa said simply, by any means necessary. They spent the rest of the morning together. Rosa showed Emma through the mansion, pointing out the medical suite where she received treatment, the library with its walls of leather-bound books, the kitchen that looked like something from a high-end restaurant. They worked on Rosa's physical therapy, gentle exercises to strengthen her left side. Rosa was a difficult patient, stubborn and proud, but she responded to Emma's encouragement in ways she clearly didn't for the professional therapists. By noon, they were back in Rosa's private sitting room, drinking tea and talking about everything except the obvious. Food, weather, books, the garden that Rosa loved but could no longer tend herself. It felt almost normal. Almost. Then Marcus appeared in the doorway, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. He wore a charcoal suit, perfectly tailored, with a black shirt underneath. No tie. His hair was damp, like he'd recently showered. There was a bruise forming on his left cheekbone that Emma didn't remember from last night. Mama, he said, his voice warm in a way Emma hadn't heard before. How are you feeling? Better, thanks to Emma. Rosa reached out her good hand, and Marcus crossed the room to take it. She's a miracle worker. She is. Marcus's eyes found Emma's. Can I borrow her for a moment? It wasn't a request. Rosa waved them away. Go, I need to rest anyway. Emma followed Marcus out of the sitting room and down the hall. He didn't speak, just walked with that predatory grace until they reached a heavy oak door. He opened it to reveal an office. The room was all dark wood and leather. A massive desk dominated the space, covered in papers and maps and photographs. The walls were lined with filing cabinets and, Emma noticed with growing unease, weapons, handguns in glass cases, knives displayed like art, a sword that looked centuries old hanging above the fireplace. But what made Emma's blood run cold was the board on the far wall. Cork, covered in photographs connected by red string. She saw faces she didn't recognize, buildings marked with X's, locations circled. And at the center of it all, a photograph of a man in his 30s, handsome in a cruel way, with dark eyes and a smile that promised violence. Vincent Caruso. The name was written beneath the photo in angry black marker. What is this? Emma asked. Marcus closed the door behind them. This is the war we're fighting, have been fighting for 20 years. Over what? Territory, power. The usual reasons men kill each other. Marcus walked to his desk and poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter. He held one out to Emma. But it's personal, too. Vincent's father killed mine. My father killed his uncle. The Santoros and the Carusos have been bleeding each other for 2 decades. It won't stop until one family is destroyed. Emma took the glass but didn't drink. What does this have to do with me? Marcus downed his whiskey in one swallow. Vincent knows I bought your debt, knows you're here, and he's going to use that against me. He'll try to take you, hurt you, kill you. Not because you matter to him, but because you matter to me. I don't matter to you. We barely know each other. That's what I keep telling myself. Marcus set his glass down and turned to face her fully. It doesn't seem to be working. Emma's heart did something complicated in her chest. She set her own glass down, untouched. You can't just decide someone matters to you. That's not how it works, isn't it? You decided my mother mattered. You spent an hour cooking a meal you'd never made before just to see her smile. Was that rational? Did you weigh the costs and benefits? That's different. How? Emma didn't have an answer. Marcus crossed the space between them. He moved slowly this time, giving her a chance to step away. She didn't. When he reached her, he lifted one hand and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were warm against her skin. I'm not a good man, Emma. I've killed people, stolen from people, done things that would make you run screaming if you knew the details. But when I saw you with my mother, something in me, he paused, jaw working. Something I thought was dead woke up, and now I can't put it back to sleep. Emma's breath caught. This is crazy. Yes. I should leave. Yes. But I'm not going to. No, Marcus agreed. You're not. The moment stretched between them, charged and dangerous. Emma could feel her pulse in her throat, in her wrists, in places she didn't have names for. Marcus's eyes had gone dark, the gray turned to smoke. His thumb traced along her jaw, barely touching, just enough to make her skin burn. Then he stepped back, and the spell broke. There's something else you need to know, Marcus said, his voice rough. He turned to his desk and picked up a manila folder. Your brother, Ryan. He didn't just run away to escape his debts. What do you mean? Marcus opened the folder and spread photographs across the desk. Emma stepped closer, her stomach sinking as she recognized the images. Ryan outside her apartment building. Ryan talking to a man in an expensive suit. Ryan taking an envelope full of cash. Ryan entering Rosa's kitchen through the back door when Emma wasn't there. He's been working for Vincent for 6 months, Marcus said quietly, long before the debt got out of control. Vincent recruited him specifically to get information about you, to create a situation where you'd need help, where you'd be vulnerable. Emma felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. No, Ryan wouldn't. Look at the dates. Marcus pointed to timestamps on the photos. This one is from March. This is from April. He's been photographing the restaurant layout, counting security, reporting your schedule. Vincent knew exactly when you'd be walking home alone because Ryan told him. Emma's hands started shaking. She pressed them flat against the desk to keep them still. Why? Money? Drugs? Freedom from his debts? Does it matter? The end result is the same. Your brother sold you to save himself. You're lying. But even as Emma said it, she knew it wasn't true. She thought about Ryan's evasiveness, the way he wouldn't meet her eyes, the mysterious friend who could make problems disappear. He'd been planning this for months, and she'd been too tired, too desperate, too trusting to see it. I'm sorry, Marcus said, and he sounded like he meant it. Emma's vision blurred. She blinked hard, refusing to cry. Not here, not in front of him. I need to be alone. Emma, please. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. You know where your room is. Tony will bring you dinner if you want. If you need anything, I won't. She left the office, left Marcus standing amid his war plans and weapons, and walked through the mansion like a ghost. People moved out of her way. Guards, servants, people whose names she didn't know and didn't care to learn. They all stared, but nobody tried to stop her. Emma made it to her room before the tears came. She collapsed on the bed, buried her face in silk pillows that smelled like expensive detergent, and let herself break. Sobs racked her body, violent and painful. She cried for her parents, dead 15 years, but still a wound that never healed. She cried for Ryan, the brother she'd loved and protected and sacrificed for, who had betrayed her for money. She cried for herself, for the life she'd tried to build that kept getting torn down. And underneath it all, she cried because Marcus had been right. She did matter to him. And despite everything, despite the danger and the violence and the impossibility of it all, he was starting to matter to her too. That was the most terrifying thing of all. Emma didn't leave her room for 2 days. Tony brought meals that she barely touched. Rosa sent notes that she didn't answer. The sun rose and set, and Emma stayed curled in her window seat, watching the river flow and trying to figure out who she was without her brother, without her old life, without any of the anchors that had kept her grounded. On the third morning, she woke with a clarity that felt like breaking through ice into cold air. She showered, dressed in clothes from the closet that fit perfectly, and went to find Rosa. The matriarch was in the garden, sitting on a stone bench among roses that had already dropped their petals for the season. She looked up when Emma approached, and her face softened with something like relief. Child, you came back to us. Emma sat beside her. I'm sorry, I needed time to think. Of course you did. Rosa reached over and squeezed Emma's hand. What did you decide? That my brother made his choice, and now I make mine. Which is? Emma looked at the mansion, at the guards patrolling the perimeter, at the life she'd stumbled into like Alice down the rabbit hole. I stay, I work with you, and I try to survive whatever comes next. Rosa smiled. Good, because my birthday is in 2 weeks and I refuse to celebrate without you. The next 14 days passed in a blur of activity. Emma threw herself into work with Rosa, helping the older woman regain strength and mobility. They walked the gardens together, cooked together in the massive kitchen, talked about everything and nothing. Rosa told stories about growing up in a world that no longer existed. Emma shared memories of her parents, precious few and fading like old photographs. Marcus kept his distance. Emma saw him sometimes, crossing the entrance hall in a suit or speaking in Italian on his phone in the library. Their eyes would meet, hold. Then he'd look away first and Emma would pretend her chest didn't ache. She learned the rhythms of the house. The guards changed shifts at 6 and midnight. Tony ran operations from a security room in the basement. The cook, Maria, made fresh pasta every Tuesday. The housekeeper, Sophia, had worked for the Santoros for 30 years and knew where every secret in the mansion was buried. Emma also learned about the birthday party. It wasn't just a family celebration. It was an event. 200 guests, politicians, judges, businessmen, and most disturbing of all, members of rival families who would attend under the banner of truce, including the Carusos. It's tradition, Rosa explained when Emma expressed concern. One night a year, old grudges are set aside. We eat, we drink, we pretend to be civilized. And the other 364 days? Rosa's smile was sharp. We are honest about what we are. 3 days before the party, Marcus finally broke his silence. Emma was reading in the library when he appeared in the doorway. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before. Can we talk? He asked. Emma set her book aside. Sure. He walked to the window, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense. The party. I want you there. I'm planning to be there, Rosa insists. I mean with me, as my date. Emma's heart stuttered. Marcus, I know. I know all the reasons it's a bad idea. You're not part of this world. I'm dangerous. This whole situation is insane. He turned to face her. But I'm asking anyway. Why? Because Vincent will be there, and I want him to see that you chose to be here, that you're not a prisoner or a victim. I want him to see that you're, he paused, searching for words, that you're mine. The possessiveness should have angered her, should have made her push back, assert her independence, remind him that she belonged to no one. But the way he said it, rough and almost desperate, made something flutter to life in her stomach. And if I say yes, Emma asked carefully, what does that make me? Safe, for one night at least. It wasn't a good answer. It wasn't even a complete answer, but Emma found herself nodding anyway. Okay, I'll go with you. The relief on Marcus's face was almost painful to see. Thank you. He left before she could change her mind. The night of Rosa's 73rd birthday party, the mansion transformed. Every light blazed. Music from a string quartet floated through the halls. The ballroom, which Emma hadn't even known existed, glittered with chandeliers and candles and flowers flown in from somewhere that still had roses in November. Emma stood in front of her mirror and barely recognized herself. The dress Marcus had chosen was emerald green silk, fitted at the waist and flowing to the floor. Elegant, expensive. The kind of dress that whispered money so old it didn't need to shout. Her hair had been styled by a professional into soft waves. Her makeup was subtle but perfect. She looked like she belonged in this world. It was terrifying. A knock at the door made her jump. Come in. Marcus entered, and the air left the room. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like it had been grown on his body. His hair was slicked back. His jaw was clean-shaven. He looked like danger wrapped in wealth, and Emma's mouth went dry. You look... Marcus stopped, shook his head. There aren't words. You clean up pretty well yourself. He held out his arm. Ready? Emma took a breath and linked her arm through his. No, but let's go anyway. They descended the grand staircase together. Below, guests mingled with champagne flutes and false smiles. Emma recognized some faces from television. A congressman, a judge, a woman who owned half the real estate in Manhattan, and scattered among them men in expensive suits who radiated danger the way other people radiated cologne. Mafia, from different families, different territories, all playing nice for one night. Rosa sat in a place of honor at the head table, resplendent in burgundy silk. She saw Emma and Marcus descending and smiled with genuine warmth. Tony stood behind her chair, alert and watchful despite the festive atmosphere. Marcus led Emma through the crowd. People parted for them, eyes followed. Conversations paused and restarted. Emma felt the weight of their attention like physical pressure. They're staring, she whispered. Let them, Marcus said. Let them see that you're not afraid. But she was afraid, terrified, because somewhere in this crowd of predators in human clothing was Vincent Caruso, and Emma could feel his eyes on her like a knife blade pressed to skin. They reached Rosa's table. The matriarch held out her hand and Emma took it, grateful for the anchor. "You look beautiful, child. Both of you." "Happy birthday, Rosa." "It is happy. For the first time in years, it is truly happy." The evening progressed like a fever dream. Dinner was served on gold-rimmed china. Speeches were made, toasting Rosa's health and strength and the prosperity of the Santoro family. The string quartet played. Couples danced. Emma sat beside Marcus, hyper-aware of his presence, of the way his hand occasionally brushed her arm or the small of her back. Then, during dessert, the temperature in the room dropped. A man appeared at their table, tall, dark-haired, with eyes like a shark and a smile that promised pain. He wore white, standing out among the sea of black tuxedos like a ghost at a funeral. Vincent Caruso. "Marcus," he said, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. "It's been too long." Marcus's hand found Emma's under the table. His grip was tight enough to hurt. "Vincent, I wasn't sure you'd come." "Miss Rosa's birthday? I wouldn't dream of it." Vincent's eyes slid to Emma. "And you must be the famous Emma Cole, the girl worth $45,000. Though looking at you now, I'd say Marcus got a bargain." Emma's skin crawled. She forced herself to meet his gaze. "Mr. Caruso?" "Please, Vincent." He pulled out a chair without invitation and sat. "I have to say, Marcus, I'm impressed. When I heard you'd moved her into your house, I thought it was just business, protection for payment. But seeing you two together," he gestured with his champagne flute, "this is personal, isn't it? My relationships are none of your concern." "Oh, but they are. When my men are sent away with threats of decapitation, when territories are redrawn, when debts are bought out from under me, it all becomes very personal." Vincent leaned forward. "Tell me, Emma, has Marcus told you about your parents yet?" Emma's heart stopped. "What?" "Vincent." Marcus's voice was deadly quiet. "Don't." "Oh, I think she deserves to know. Daniel and Marie Cole. They died in a fire 15 years ago at a restaurant in Little Italy. What was it called? Rosa's Kitchen, I believe." The world tilted. Emma turned to Marcus, seeing the truth written on his face. The guilt, the pain, the secret he'd been carrying. "My restaurant?" Emma's voice came out strangled. "My parents died in your restaurant?" "It wasn't his restaurant then," Vincent continued, clearly enjoying the devastation he was causing. "It belonged to Marcus's father. And the fire? Well, let's just say it wasn't an accident. Turf war. My father wanted that block. His father wanted to keep it. Your parents were closing up after a late shift. Wrong place, wrong time. Collateral damage." Emma couldn't breathe. The room spun. 14 years of grief, of not knowing, of thinking it was random chance, and all along it had been murder. And Marcus had known. He'd known from the beginning who she was, what his family had done, and he'd said nothing. She stood so fast her chair toppled backward. "You knew." Marcus stood too, reaching for her. "Emma, please, let me explain. You knew who I was, what happened to them, and you brought me here anyway. I was trying to protect you. From the truth?" Her voice broke. "From knowing that the man I—" She stopped, horror dawning. "Oh God, I almost—" "And you knew the entire time." She ran, through the ballroom, past the staring guests, past Tony's concerned face, and Rosa's stricken expression. She ran through the mansion halls until she found a door that led outside, into the cold November night. Behind her she heard shouting. Chaos. The party dissolving into something else. Emma didn't care. She kept running toward the iron gates, toward freedom, toward anything that wasn't the suffocating weight of betrayal. She almost made it. A car screeched to a halt in front of her. Doors opened. Men emerged from shadows. Before Emma could scream, a hand clamped over her mouth. An arm locked around her waist. She was lifted, carried, thrown into the back of a vehicle. The last thing she saw before a bag went over her head was the mansion receding into the distance, lights blazing like a beacon she couldn't reach. The last thing she heard was Vincent Caruso's voice, close to her ear, reeking of expensive cologne and malice. "Did you really think Marcus could protect you? Nobody can, not from me." Then darkness, motion, and the knowledge that she'd been a fool to trust any of them. The darkness smelled like gasoline and river water, and fear. Emma's wrists were bound behind her back with zip ties that cut into her skin. The bag over her head made every breath a struggle against panic. She could hear the slap of waves against the hull, feel the rocking motion of a boat, taste blood where she'd bitten her tongue when they threw her down. Voices drifted through the fabric. Men laughing, the clink of bottles. Vincent's smooth tenor giving orders in Italian she didn't understand. They'd been traveling for what felt like hours but might have been minutes. Time lost meaning in the dark. The bag was ripped off suddenly. Emma blinked against the assault of light. She was in the cabin of a speedboat, expensive and sleek, cutting through the black waters of the Hudson. Three men surrounded her. Vincent sat across from her on a leather bench, legs crossed, looking like he was on his way to a yacht party instead of a kidnapping. "Welcome back," he said pleasantly. "I was worried you'd passed out. That would have ruined the fun." Emma's throat was raw. She swallowed and forced words out. "Marcus will come for me." "Oh, I'm counting on it. That's the entire point." Vincent leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "See, Marcus thinks he's untouchable. Thinks he can buy debts and steal property and threaten my men without consequences. I'm going to teach him otherwise. And you, sweet Emma, are the lesson. I'm nobody, just a waitress. This won't accomplish anything." Vincent's smile widened. "You really believe that? You think Marcus Santoro moves a woman into his home, buys her $45,000 worth of freedom, and then parades her around his mother's birthday party because she's nobody?" He laughed. "You're not just somebody. You're the first person he's cared about in 15 years. Since your parents died and broke whatever was human in him." The words hit like physical blows. Emma's vision swam. He knew. He knew who I was. Of course he knew. Marcus knows everything. It's his gift and his curse. Vincent pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. "Want to see something interesting?" He turned the phone toward her. Security footage from the mansion. Marcus in his office, staring at a photograph. Emma couldn't see the image clearly, but she saw Marcus's face. Saw raw grief carved into every line. Saw him touch the photograph like it hurt him to look at it. "That's from 2 months ago," Vincent said. "Right after he identified you. He's been watching you ever since, trying to figure out if saving you could somehow make up for failing to save them." He pocketed the phone. "Spoiler alert, it can't. The dead stay dead. And tonight I'm going to make him watch you join them." Emma's stomach turned to ice. "You're going to kill me." "Eventually, but first we're going to have some fun. Make a video. Send it to Marcus. Watch him tear his world apart trying to find you." Vincent stood and stretched. "By the time he figures out where you are, it'll be too late. For you and for him." The boat began to slow. Through the small windows, Emma could see lights. A dock. Buildings rising from darkness. They were approaching an island, small and private, with a mansion that looked like it had been stolen from a Gothic nightmare. Vincent's compound. His fortress. The one place Marcus couldn't easily reach. Two men hauled Emma to her feet and dragged her onto the dock. Her legs barely worked. Terror had turned her muscles to water. But she forced herself to stay conscious, to observe, to look for any chance of escape. The mansion's interior matched the exterior. Dark wood, heavy furniture, weapons mounted on walls like trophies. Vincent led them through hallways lit by sconces that cast dancing shadows. Down a flight of stone stairs, into a wine cellar that had been converted into something else entirely. A cell. Iron bars, a bare mattress on the floor, a bucket in the corner. They threw Emma inside and locked the door. Vincent remained on the other side of the bars, studying her like she was an interesting specimen. "Marcus will come," Emma said again, because it was the only weapon she had. "And when he does, you'll regret this. I'm counting on him coming. This whole thing only works if he walks into my trap." Vincent turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Emma, your brother says hello. He's been very helpful with information about the Santoro operation. Amazing what a gambling addict will do for money." Then he was gone, and Emma was alone in the dark. She didn't know how long she sat there. Long enough for her hands to go numb from the zip ties. Long enough for cold to seep into her bones. Long enough to cycle through terror and anger and despair and back to terror again. But underneath it all, a thought kept circling. Marcus would come. Vincent had said it himself. This was a trap, which meant Marcus was walking into danger, and it was her fault for running, for believing Vincent's poison, for not trusting the man who had done nothing but try to protect her. Emma worked at the zip ties, ignoring the pain as plastic cut deeper into her wrists. She searched the cell for anything sharp, anything useful. Found nothing but stone and iron and shadows. Above her, she heard footsteps. Voices. The mansion coming alive with activity. Then distantly, an explosion. The wine cellar shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere upstairs, men started shouting. Gunfire erupted, rapid and close. The sound of war coming to Vincent's fortress. Emma pressed herself against the bars, heart hammering. Marcus! The battle moved through the mansion like a storm. Emma tracked it by sound. Breaking glass, screams, the heavy thud of bodies hitting floors. More explosions, smaller this time. Flashbangs, maybe, or grenades. The violence was extraordinary, biblical, the kind of chaos that happened when two armies decided a single person was worth burning the world. Then silence, long and terrible. Footsteps on the stairs, slow, deliberate. Emma's breath caught. Friend or enemy? Salvation or execution? A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, broad, moving with liquid grace despite the blood soaking through his shirt sleeve. Marcus. His face was a mask of controlled fury and desperate relief. He crossed to the cell in 3 strides, pulling a keyring from his pocket. His hands shook as he unlocked the door. Emma. Her name came out broken. God, Emma, I thought. She stumbled out of the cell and into his arms. He caught her, one arm banding around her waist, the other cradling the back of her head. He smelled like gunpowder and smoke, and something copper that was probably blood. He was shaking, or she was, or they both were. I'm sorry, Emma said into his chest. I shouldn't have run. I should have let you explain. No, I should have told you from the beginning. Marcus pulled back just enough to look at her face. His gray eyes were bright with emotion she'd never seen before. I should have been honest about everything. Your parents, my father, the guilt I've carried for 15 years. But I was afraid if you knew, you'd look at me the way you're looking at me right now. How am I looking at you? Like I'm a monster. Emma shook her head. I'm looking at you like you're a man who came into hell to pull me out. That's not a monster, Marcus. That's a hero. Something in his expression cracked. He pulled her close again, burying his face in her hair. I need to get you out of here. Vincent escaped during the assault. He's somewhere in the mansion, and I won't risk. A slow clap echoed through the wine cellar. They both turned. Vincent stood at the top of the stairs, backlit by the carnage above. He held a gun in one hand and a phone in the other. Touching, he said. Really, I almost feel bad about what happens next. He raised the gun, aiming at Marcus's chest. Say goodbye, Santoro. Emma moved without thinking. She grabbed a broken bottle from the floor, remnant of some long-ago celebration, and hurled it with every ounce of strength she possessed. The bottle spun through the air, glittering in the dim light, and shattered against the side of Vincent's head. He staggered. The gun went off, the bullet going wide, sparking off stone. Marcus lunged forward, tackling Vincent before he could recover. They crashed to the ground in a tangle of limbs and violence. Emma ran up the stairs, through the mansion, stepping over unconscious or dead men in Caruso colors. She found the armory Vincent had been so proud of and grabbed the first handgun she recognized. A Glock, simple and deadly. Marcus had taught her the basics during those long afternoons in the estate basement. Point, breathe, squeeze. She checked the magazine, loaded, safety off. Emma ran back to the wine cellar. Marcus and Vincent were locked together, rolling across the floor. Marcus had size and strength. Vincent had desperation and rage. Blood slicked the stones, making them both slip and slide. Vincent got on top, hands around Marcus's throat, squeezing. Vincent! Emma's voice cracked like a whip. He looked up, saw the gun pointed at his face, saw Emma's hands, steady despite everything, saw death looking back at him. You won't, he gasped. You're not a killer. Emma thought about her parents, about Ryan, about every person Vincent Caruso had hurt or destroyed or used as a pawn in his games. She thought about Marcus, choking beneath Vincent's hands, and she knew the truth. She could pull the trigger, could end this, could become exactly what this world demanded. But she wouldn't. You're right, Emma said. I'm not. She adjusted her aim and shot Vincent in the knee. He howled, releasing Marcus, clutching his shattered leg. Marcus rolled away, coughing, gasping for air. Emma kept the gun trained on Vincent as he writhed on the floor. That's for my parents, she said quietly. The rest is up to the justice system. Sirens wailed in the distance. Tony appeared at the top of the stairs, phone in hand. Boss, FBI is 2 minutes out. We need to move. Marcus stood, swaying slightly. He looked at Emma, at the gun in her hands, at Vincent bleeding on the floor. Something passed between them, unspoken but understood. She'd saved him. Not by killing, but by choosing mercy when vengeance would have been easier. Come on, Marcus said, taking her hand. Let's go home. They left Vincent Caruso for the federal agents who'd been building a case against him for 3 years. left him screaming threats and promises of revenge that would never come to fruition. By the time Emma and Marcus reached the speedboat, the island was swarming with law enforcement. The ride back to Manhattan was silent. Emma sat pressed against Marcus's side, his arm around her shoulders, both of them too exhausted for words. Tony piloted the boat with quiet efficiency. The city lights grew closer, welcoming them back to a world that suddenly felt different. At the private dock, Rosa was waiting. She sat in her wheelchair, wrapped in a shawl, flanked by guards. When she saw them, she stood, leaning heavily on her cane, and opened her arms. Emma walked into that embrace and finally let herself cry. "Hush, child," Rosa murmured. "You're safe now. You're home." Over Rosa's shoulder, Emma saw Marcus watching them. His face was a landscape of emotion, relief, gratitude, love so raw it hurt to witness. Their eyes met, and Emma knew. Whatever came next, whatever truth still needed to be told, they would face it together. The next morning, Emma woke in her room at the estate to find Rosa sitting by the window, watching the sunrise paint the Hudson in shades of gold and rose. "We need to talk," Rosa said without preamble. "About your parents, about the night they died, about everything Marcus hasn't told you." Emma sat up, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. "I'm listening." Rosa's hands twisted in her lap, the strong, confident matriarch suddenly looking every one of her 73 years. "Your father, Daniel Cole, he wasn't just a restaurant worker. He was an accountant for the Caruso family. Money laundering, tax evasion, the usual financial crimes. But he was good at his job. Too good. He started noticing things, discrepancies, money being funneled to offshore accounts that had nothing to do with legitimate business. Human trafficking," Rosa said quietly. Vincent's father was running a trafficking ring. Young women mostly, brought in from Eastern Europe and Asia, promised given nightmares instead. Your father found the proof. He was going to take it to the FBI. Emma's chest constricted. "So they killed him." Vincent's father ordered the hit, a fire at Rosa's kitchen, where your parents both happened to work that night. Make it look like an electrical accident. Destroy the evidence. Silence the witnesses. Rosa's eyes filled with tears. "I knew. I was the accountant for the Santoro family then. I heard rumors, saw the planning, but I was pregnant with Marcus, terrified of losing him, and I stayed silent." "You let them die," Emma's voice was flat. "Yes." Rosa didn't flinch from the accusation. "I let them die to protect my son. It's the choice every mother hopes she never has to make, and I made it wrong. I've been living with that guilt for 15 years. Emma stood and walked to the window. Below, the grounds were peaceful. Guards walked their routes. Birds sang in the trees. The world kept turning, indifferent to human suffering. Does Marcus know? He knows. He was 17, working for his father, learning the business. When he found out about the fire, about your parents, about your mother being 8 months pregnant with your sister, something in him broke. Rosa's voice cracked. He confronted his father. They fought. And 3 days later, his father was dead. Officially a heart attack. But Marcus told me the truth. He smothered him with a pillow while the old man slept. Emma turned. He killed his own father? For your family, for every innocent life his father had destroyed. Marcus has spent the last 15 years trying to atone, dismantling trafficking rings, protecting people the system ignores. And when he found you alive and kind despite everything you'd lost, he saw a chance at redemption he didn't think he deserved. The pieces clicked into place. Marcus's obsession, his need to protect her, the guilt that drove him like a man possessed. He wasn't just attracted to Emma. He was trying to save the daughter of the people he'd failed to save 15 years ago. "I had a sister," Emma said, testing the words. They felt strange in her mouth. "She would have been 14 now." "Yes." Emma pressed her forehead against the cool glass and let the grief wash over her. Not just for her parents anymore, but for the siblings she'd never known, for the family that could have been, for the life stolen by men who valued money over humanity. But underneath the grief, something else stirred. Understanding, forgiveness, maybe. The recognition that everyone in this story had been damaged by the same machine, grinding them all to dust. "I need to see Marcus," Emma said. She found him in his office, staring at the photographs on his warboard. He didn't turn when she entered, but his shoulders tensed. "Rosa told you everything," he said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes. And now you hate me." Emma crossed the room and turned him to face her. His eyes were red-rimmed, haunted. She reached up and cupped his face in both hands. "I don't hate you. I understand you. I let them die, Emma. I was there. I could have. You were 17, a kid. You did what you thought was right, and then you spent 15 years making up for it. It's not enough. It will never be enough. Maybe not, but it's something. Emma pulled his face down to hers. We're both survivors of the same tragedy, both shaped by loss. Maybe that means we can heal each other. I don't deserve, she kissed him, cut off the self-flagellation with her lips against his, poured everything she felt into that kiss. The terror of the past 24 hours, the relief of being alive, the strange, impossible love growing between them like something wild and necessary. Marcus responded with desperate intensity. His arms came around her, lifting her against him, holding her like she might disappear. The kiss deepened, turned hungry, became something that demanded more than either of them could give in this moment. Emma pulled back, breathing hard. I'm not forgiving you yet, not completely, but I'm choosing you anyway, despite everything, because of everything. Do you understand? Marcus's thumb traced her bottom lip. I'll spend the rest of my life earning that forgiveness. Good, because I'm not making this easy. A knock interrupted them. Tony entered, looking uncharacteristically uncomfortable. Boss, we found the brother. Emma's heart stopped. Ryan? Where? Reno, checked into a hospital 3 days ago. Overdose. He's stable now, but... Tony glanced at Marcus. He wants to talk to Emma. The flight to Nevada took 6 hours. Emma spent most of it staring out the window, watching the country scroll by beneath her. Marcus sat across from her in the private jet, giving her space but staying close enough to offer comfort if she needed it. Ryan was in a charity hospital on the outskirts of Reno, the kind of place people went when they had no insurance and nowhere else to turn. Emma found him in a shared room, looking 20 years older than his 28 years. His skin was sallow, his eyes sunken. He'd lost weight he couldn't afford to lose. When he saw Emma, he started crying. God, Em, I'm so sorry, I'm so fucking sorry. Emma sat in the chair beside his bed. She'd prepared a speech on the plane, all the things she wanted to say, needed to say, to exorcise the betrayal. But looking at her brother, broken and sobbing, the words evaporated. Why? She asked simply. Because I'm weak. Because I'm selfish. Because Vincent offered me a way out, and I took it without thinking about what it would cost you. Ryan grabbed her hand with both of his. I set you up, Em. I told them your schedule, photographed the restaurant, made sure you'd be vulnerable, and then when I realized what they were actually planning, I panicked and ran. You left me. I know, I'm the worst brother in the world. I'm the worst person. But I tried to make it right. I called the FBI, told them everything about Vincent's operation, gave them evidence. That's why they raided the island so fast. He coughed, a wet rattling sound. It doesn't make up for anything. I know that, but I tried. Emma squeezed his hand. You gave them Vincent. You helped put him away. It's not enough. Maybe not, but it's something. She echoed her own words to Marcus. You're going to rehab, Ryan, a real facility. Marcus is paying for it. And when you're clean, we'll figure out what comes next. Why would he do that? After everything I did? Because he loves me, and I love you, despite everything. Ryan closed his eyes, fresh tears leaking from the corners. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. They sat in silence for a while. Then Emma told him everything. About the mansion, about Marcus, about their parents and the truth she'd finally learned. Ryan listened, his face cycling through shock and grief and something like understanding. We're both orphans twice over, he said finally. Once when they died, and again when we learned the truth. Yes, but we're still here, still fighting. That has to count for something. Ryan nodded. I'll get clean, Em, I swear. I'll get clean and I'll be the brother you deserve, even if it takes the rest of my life. That's all I ask. Emma left the hospital as the sun set, painting the Nevada desert in shades of amber and crimson. Marcus was waiting by the car, leaning against the hood, face tilted toward the dying light. How is he? Marcus asked. Broken, but maybe ready to be fixed. Emma leaned against the car beside him. Thank you for paying for rehab. You didn't have to. He's your family. That makes him my responsibility now. Emma turned to look at him. Your responsibility? Marcus met her eyes. I'm in love with you, Emma Cole. I know it's too fast, too complicated, too everything. I know you're not ready to hear it, but I need you to know anyway. Every decision I make now, I make with you in mind. Your happiness, your safety, your family. It's all mine to protect. Emma's heart did something acrobatic in her chest. That's a big claim. I know. I'm not ready to say it back. I know that too. But I think I could be, given time. Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, made him look younger, lighter. I'll wait. They flew back to New York in comfortable silence. Emma slept with her head on Marcus's shoulder, feeling safer than she had in years. When they landed, Rosa was waiting at the mansion with hot chocolate and a knowing smile. 6 months passed. Winter turned to spring. The Caruso family crumbled without Vincent, scattered by federal indictments and internal power struggles. Marcus slowly, methodically dismantled his own criminal operations, transitioning to legitimate business. It wasn't easy. Some associates left, others threatened. But Marcus was patient, relentless, and backed by Rosa's strategic brilliance. Emma found her place in this new world. She reopened Rosa's kitchen, renovated and renamed Marie's kitchen in honor of her mother. Ryan managed it after completing rehab, sober for the first time in a decade. The restaurant became something special, a place where people from all walks of life could find a good meal and a moment of peace. Emma and Marcus moved slowly, carefully. They had dinner together every night, walked the estate grounds, talked about everything and nothing. He taught her to shoot properly, to defend herself, to never be a victim again. She taught him to laugh, to relax, to believe he was more than the sum of his sins. On a warm evening in May, Marcus took Emma to the restaurant after closing. The space was empty, tables cleared, lights dimmed, but candles flickered on a table by the window. The one where Rosa had first sat, where this entire impossible story had begun. "What's this?" Emma asked. Marcus pulled out a chair for her. "Sit, please." She sat. He disappeared into the kitchen and returned carrying 2 plates. Ossobuco, made from Rosa's recipe, the one Emma had followed that first night. The smell alone brought tears to her eyes. They ate in comfortable silence, the city lights twinkling beyond the window. When they finished, Marcus stood and offered his hand. "Dance with me." "There's no music." "We don't need music." Emma took his hand and let him pull her close. They swayed together in the quiet restaurant, holding each other like drowning people hold driftwood. Emma rested her head on Marcus's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," she said. Simple. True. "I think I've loved you since you wrapped your coat around me in the rain. I just needed time to admit it." Marcus's arms tightened around her. "Say it again." "I love you, Marcus Santoro. You and all your complicated, damaged, beautiful pieces." He pulled back just enough to look at her face, reached into his pocket, drew out a small velvet box. Emma's breath caught. "I know this is a restaurant, not a mansion balcony or a fancy proposal location. But this is where it started, where you showed my mother kindness, where I first saw you and thought maybe, just maybe, I could be someone worthy of you." He opened the box. An emerald ring, deep green flanked by diamonds, caught the candlelight. "Marry me, Emma, not because you have to, not because you owe me, but because you choose me. Every day, the way I choose you." Emma looked at the ring, at the man holding it, at the life they'd built from tragedy and violence and impossible odds. She thought about her parents, about the sister she'd never known, about Ryan fighting for sobriety, about Rosa teaching her to be strong. She thought about the girl who'd been a waitress 6 months ago, barely surviving, and the woman she'd become, a woman who owned a restaurant, who'd shot a man to save the person she loved, who'd learned that sometimes the darkest places contain the brightest lights. "Yes," Emma said. "Yes, I'll marry you, but you have to promise me something. Anything. No more shooting in the house. It ruins the carpets." Marcus laughed, the sound rich and full. He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her. The kiss tasted like ossobuco and wine and promises kept, like coming home after a long journey through hell. Outside, spring rain began to fall, but inside Marie's kitchen, 2 survivors held each other and dared to believe in happy endings. The wedding was small, 50 people in the estate gardens, cherry blossoms falling like snow. Rosa officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for this purpose. She wore emerald green to match Emma's ring and cried through the entire ceremony. Ryan stood beside Emma, sober and steady, giving her away with a speech that made everyone weep. Tony stood beside Marcus, the brother he'd never had by blood, but had chosen through loyalty. When Marcus and Emma exchanged vows, they rewrote the traditional words. Emma promised to be patient with his darkness. Marcus promised to be worthy of her light. They promised to fight, to forgive, to choose each other when it would be easier to walk away. The reception was joyful, free of the tension that had marked Rose's birthday. No rival families, no politicians playing both sides. Just people who loved each other, celebrating a love that had survived impossible odds. As the sun set and the music played, Emma and Marcus slipped away to the balcony overlooking the Hudson. The same balcony where this story had turned from rescue to something more. "Do you ever regret it?" Emma asked, leaning against the railing. "Leaving that life behind?" Marcus stood beside her, their shoulders touching. "Never. You gave me something worth more than power." "What?" "Peace." Emma smiled and turned to face him. Took a breath. "I'm pregnant." Marcus froze. "What?" "About 8 weeks. I found out this morning. I was going to tell you tonight, but..." She gestured at the wedding reception behind them. "Surprise?" Marcus knelt in front of her, placed both hands on her stomach, still flat beneath her wedding dress. His eyes were bright with tears. "A baby. Our baby, a fresh start." "I don't know how to be a father," he admitted. "My own father was..." "Your father was a monster. You're not him. You'll be better. We'll figure it out together." Marcus stood and pulled her into his arms, held her like she was the most precious thing in the world, which to him she was. "I love you. Both of you. We love you too." They stood on the balcony as the stars came out, two people who'd found each other in darkness and built something bright. The road hadn't been easy. It had been blood and tears and choices that would haunt them forever. But they'd survived. More than survived. They'd found a way to heal. 5 years later, Emma stood in Marie's kitchen during the lunch rush, managing the chaos with practiced ease. Her daughter, Marie Rose, named for both grandmothers, played in the office with coloring books. Ryan, 5 years sober, managed the front of house with quiet competence. The restaurant had expanded, now a fixture in the neighborhood, known for excellent food and the woman who'd turned tragedy into triumph. Marcus walked through the door at his usual time, 12:30, wearing a suit but no longer carrying weapons. He transitioned fully to legitimate business, running real estate development and charitable foundations. The Santoro name meant something different now. Not fear, but respect. Marie saw her father and ran to him with a shriek of delight. Marcus scooped her up, spinning her until she giggled. Emma watched them, heart full, and thought about how far they'd all come. That night, after Marie was asleep and the house was quiet, Emma and Marcus sat on their balcony. The same balcony where everything had changed, where they'd chosen each other again and again. "A man came to the restaurant today," Emma said. Italian accent. Said he was Vincent's cousin from Sicily. Wanted to talk. Marcus tensed. "What did you tell him?" "That we're not in that business anymore. That the answer is no. That if his family has a problem, they can take it up with our lawyers." And he smiled and left. "But Marcus..." Emma turned to face him. "He said we'd hear from them again. That blood calls to blood." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he took her hand. "Let them come. We've survived worse. Together." Emma nodded, because it was true. They'd survived betrayal and violence and grief that should have destroyed them. They'd built a life from the ashes of their parents' deaths. They'd learned to love when love seemed impossible. Whatever came next, they would face it the same way they'd faced everything else. Together, with courage, with hope, with the knowledge that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is refuse to let darkness win. In the nursery, Marie Rose slept peacefully, dreaming whatever dreams 5-year-olds dream. Downstairs, Rosa sat in her favorite chair, reading by lamplight, alive and well, and finally at peace. In Nevada, Ryan closed up a second location of Marie's kitchen, proud of the life he'd rebuilt. And on the balcony overlooking the Hudson, two survivors held hands and watched the stars, knowing that their story, however it had begun, was far from over. But for tonight, this moment, they had everything they needed: love, family, and the strength to face whatever tomorrow brought. The end.